Not aware of AWIP, but we are a non-profit organization advancing women in product, and we champion future product leaders through skills-based training and executive mentorship. We have a bunch of events that are coming up. Let's get the next slide.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. In San Francisco, Boston, and Seattle. For more information, you can log on to our website, join our Facebook group. We also live stream all our events, so it's another place to catch up. And for today, we want to thank our sponsors, AWS, and I would like to call on Emma, who is our sales tech lead at game sales lead at Game Tech. Hey, Lana.
Thank you.
You just got to press the button.
All right. Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate it. So my name's Emil Mahana. I'm part of the game tech team at Amazon Web Services. We sell fancy products to fancy games companies. And recently I've been doing a lot of interviews and looking at candidates and sitting on what we call loops, and it was dude after dude after dude after dude, and I said, you know, there are a lot of women out here, and I know that there are a lot of women in games. So I met with Nancy, who's in charge of AWIP, and said, hey, why don't we put together an event, talk about what a day in the life of a developer is like, and hopefully it's an opportunity for us to also meet some fantastic candidates and see who may be out there that's interested in role with us or with anyone else in games. I think there's a lot of doors that are open that maybe people don't know about quite yet. So that is a slide of all of the different areas that Amazon has available. We'd like for you to come look at us. So we've got a lot of different functions that people don't know about that service the games industry. You probably know about the Twitch brand and maybe Lumberyard. A lot of folks don't know about some of the other functions we have. I'm not going to do a sales pitch up here because Kate told me I'm not allowed to. So anyway, I'm going to point out Stephanie right there, and she's with our recruiting team. She's wearing a Game Tech t-shirt. You guys can feel free to reach out to her. There's some information up there in case you'd like to follow up. But I'm going to turn it over to Jenny, and she's going to take us away.
Awesome. I'm not going to use this. Can you guys hear me? Yes? Yeah. Okay, awesome. I'm not going to use the mic then. So I just want to do a quick introduction of our panelists, and then we'll move into basically kind of the panel today, and then we'll leave the end for kind of questions, if that's okay with everyone. Do you guys want to kick it off?
Sure. My name is Khevna Shah. I'm a curriculum developer at Grossly Code. For those of you who might not know, Grossly Code is an organization that's focused on closing the gender gap in technology. And I was formerly a technical game designer at Rockstar for 3.5 years.
My name is Katrina Wolfe. I work at Kongregate as a senior operations manager. I've worked in games for about 10 years. I went to college for games and then started as a game designer, went into production, and now into operations. So I kind of hopped around a bit.
My name is Kate Kellogg. I'm the head of operations for Amazon Game Studios. I also sit across from Emil. And I started in a dev studio called Irrational Games and have had a number of different roles in the games industry.
So I put all the logos of where all these people have worked, so in case, you know, they're not doing themselves justice, but they've worked in a lot of cool places, basically is what I'm gonna say. So before I put together a little presentation, but just so I know who I'm speaking to today, can you give a show of hands of how many of you guys work in the game industry? Okay. How many of you guys are people who are interested in joining the game industry? Oh, we have a pretty good mix. Awesome. So I kind of want to just start off, I think most of the people in this room kind of know that, let's talk about the female representation of basically women are playing more games than ever, and it's really driven by, mobile, the rise of mobile in the past few years, and the games that are catering to that space. So, and then really kind of going into some of the challenges that we see women facing in this industry is really, hey, boys are more likely to kind of identify and talk about, are you a gamer? Do you like playing games? At least from my perspective, that's what I've seen. And we see that, I see all it says. Basically, just from a Google Play survey saw that 57% of men identify themselves as gamers compared to only 30 or 29% of women. that's a huge difference, right? So I don't know how many of you guys today in this room identify themselves as gamer. Anyone? All right, okay, awesome. So you guys are different demographic. That's great, that's awesome. And then lastly, the second challenge is really just about inclusion. You know, there's also some, because of this mobile shift from kind of traditional gaming to more of the modern mobile games, you're seeing like an identity crisis almost of with like, I think Khevna will speak to later today of like Gamergate, like, oh, just because you're playing mobile games, are you a true gamer or not? And so there is kind of that inclusion challenge as well. So that's just my quick overview of kind of what I'm seeing some of the challenges in the industry today. And what I would now like to shift to is more to the panelists and just, you know, starting off by sharing some of your experiences of what has kind of been for you guys to work as a female in the industry in your various roles at all these different companies. Want to start?
Yes, sure. I've been in and out of games for 15 years, and I think one of the things that occurs to me is how much it's changed, how much the business has changed, how much cultural awareness has changed. There were a lot of things that happened in those early days that didn't even really catch my eye that now I think I would say, are you kidding me? Like, that's not how we talk, that's not how we act, this is a business setting. And I think there's a different understanding of what that means. That said, I still think we have a huge amount of work to do, and I think that's one of the reasons we're here. Like, we can see the statistics, and keeping that conversation going from all aspects, from all seats, is really important. Do you want me to? I think that we should probably start with this, and we can get into individual stories, or how do you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to also just talk about like, oh, were any of the call outs I mentioned, did you have personal stories that related to those situations that you think would resonate with this group?
Sure. I think one of the things that has been kind of consistent throughout my career, and I think this relates to being one of a smaller group within games, is like, we would be in a group of people, I would probably be the only woman, and someone might make a comment or a joke that was a little questionable or a little bit in the gray area of whether it was okay, and they would look to me and apologize and say, oh, sorry, as if I was holding the bar for what was an appropriate standard, or if I was in charge of what was okay. I think that's one of those things that now I'm really comfortable calling out and saying, you know, I think everybody here might have an opinion about whether that's an acceptable comment. But earlier in my career, I think I would have just laughed and gone forward.
I basically had the same feeling of that. Early on at my first job, there was a few women at the company, and we were a small startup. So it was not a small startup, and we were all college buddies. So like the entire company was basically all come from the college that I went to. And so this is a very casual, chill, everyone's best friends. And so those types of conversations that happened there were wildly inappropriate. And I remember there was one girl on the engineering team who just always commented of how uncomfortable she felt because she's the only woman there. And if she calls it out, she's obviously going to be the person that calls it out. And I remember just getting really angry, and then I went ahead and just called it out for her, and I was like, I don't care. I'm going to say this is awful and bad. And it slowly helped. I agree, it has changed. I think the last 10 years has completely different feeling that there are more people aware and more people realizing to think before they speak and to have that moment of like, wait, is this what I should be saying? Is this how I should be behaving? And I think it's helped a lot, but I think what I've really appreciated at my current job is how intensely everyone tries to pay attention, and how our CEO, she makes a huge effort to say, if you ever have problems, you can come directly to me. And I have said that to other coworkers of mine at previous jobs of like, if you have a problem, like I will speak up on your behalf. And I think the more people that we have doing that, it's just helping the ecosystem realize that there are problems and that you can't be doing these things, and then just kind of, it's definitely gotten better since then.
Yeah, I want to echo what you said about like being the holder of what is like okay. You know, at my job, I was the only one doing my role at Rockstar. There were probably 100 men to me, and so yeah, anytime there was like a group setting outside of work or at work, it was really, okay, she's here, what are we allowed to say and not to say? And there were definitely times when I would just brush things off or just be like, yeah, you can say whatever, because then I don't want to necessarily like be the police, you know, and like let people come to their own conclusions. And to speak to like the Gamergate thing, it was really interesting when that first broke out. Was actually my first year in the games industry, and it was Halloween, and one of my coworkers actually dressed up as Gamergate because she was the only female programmer. So we were like two in a sea of like 150 men, and it was just very, like at that time it was very scary, but I do see that the industry is changing. And particularly now that I work for Girls Who Code, I know that it's changing because our girls are growing up and they are making games and interested in the gaming industry. So I have really high hopes for that changing in the next 5-10 years.
Can you speak up?
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Cool. So Katrina, you had mentioned actually something really interesting about how in your current role, you actually have a female founder, right? How do you think that actually shifts the culture of a gaming studio compared to some of, the other experiences you've had?
Yeah, I definitely think it makes a significant impact. Emily Greer, our CEO, she and co-founder, she is very, very proactive about trying to make a culture that is inclusive as best as she can. And so, she goes out of her way to talk to people at her company. I remember before every GDC, she kind of talks to the entire company being like, hey, we're at an industry-wide event. Like, think about how you behave. You're representing the game industry and you're representing Kongregate. Pay attention, help other people. So it's a conversation that we're having a lot at our company. And, Emily talks about being a woman in games at different panels and things as well. And so has made a culture that is awesome, and I love working there, and we have a lot of women in senior leadership, which is also great, and make a huge effort when we're looking for resumes to try and get a balanced group and like look at everyone and try and remove our biases and think about them and talk about them. We've even like in resume reading, we talk through our own biases to try and like help make sure we know how we're feeling if we're impacting it in a way that we don't quite realize.
So I guess this is for all of you, what recommendations or best practices have you seen that you can really give to this group of audience and for people who are either entering games or in the game industry? Like, how can you change that culture, right? Because I think most studios still don't have that female leadership. So what can you do from either a female or a male perspective of trying to shape that from the ground up?
I can take that one.
I have lots of things. I just talked, so I'm feeling.
I'll give a couple and then you can jump in. I mean, I think the first thing, I think there's a lot of things going in, but one of the things that's really important in these conversations is to try and make sure to think about your own bias in the situation and trying to unpack things around your own skill set versus any bias that might be happening. I think that's one of the things that can get really complicated very quickly, so trying to separate out those threads is critical. The other thing is building allies in your environment, looking for people who might share certain mindsets that you can talk to and talk these things through. It's super important just so you can hear yourself, test out your thinking, and if you want to approach something about something that's making you uncomfortable, like have a test bed to try that out. And the last thing is to be brave. We all have to be brave. Everyone involved, whether you're a man or a woman or however you identify, trying to be brave and speak your own truth and ask people to respect you, I think is super important. And the more that everyone does that, it makes it a safe space for everyone to bring up and say something like, hey, that made me uncomfortable. And for any reason.
I have the same ones. That is like the same things I have learned through the whole process I've gone through, especially finding allies. I think that was the thing that's helped me most in actually making a change in how people perceive me. At Kongregate, I started pretty junior and was struggling to get my voice heard. We had a team that was an external team in Chicago and in San Diego, and we had, anyway, a bunch of people that couldn't see face to face, and so I was having a hard time getting them to believe me and to trust me, and I was like, am I not saying the right things? Am I not, is it just sexist? Is what's happening? So I got a coworker of mine to help me, and I was like, hey, can you just be more aware in these conversations and like either give me advice on how I can communicate better, or if you do think that they're doing something wrong, call it out. And what I got really good at and he got really good at is just kind of doing there's a phrase for it, when you reinforce. So like I would say something and then someone else would repeat what I said, and then I asked him to just always call it out and be like, oh yes, Katrina just said that. And so in our internal office, we built this habit of saying, oh yeah, this person just said that. Oh yeah, this person just said that. And it happened more to women, to be honest, but it was helpful for even the men to have that for them, for the more junior people trying to get heard and just have a presence in the conversations.
Yeah, I want to echo like the things we focus on at Girls Who Code is really bravery and sisterhood. Like having that group that you can go to no matter what happens. I can talk to them about it, process it, and then come back. That was really important in my experience. When I started coding, I had my best friend, and she also really loved coding and making games, and so I had that person to go to drive me, and that passion then made it so that no matter what situation I was in, I felt strong. So it's like, I can do this, and she gave me that strength.
So I think I'm hearing a common theme about speaking up and just voicing your concerns. So I think as women, there's a fine line between giving your opinions and almost sounding too whiny or too bossy, or any negative adjective, just put it in there. And so how would you guys recommend someone in a super male dominated industry navigate that?
I would recommend there be trainings. At Girls Who Code, we've done a bunch of trainings about diversity and inclusion, and they have really helped me figure out what's the right way to phrase something that is coming from my personal context and not pressing up against the other person, so that my opinion is actually heard.
I would say, go ahead. I don't have anything off the top of my head.
I would say, I think there's a couple of things that can help people. One is to be really thoughtful about the way you're going to engage with someone, to think about the person, what you know about them, how they best receive information. Especially if it's information that is something like, hey, that didn't make me feel good. Is that going to be something this person is going to hear best individually, or perhaps in an email? Do you maybe want an ally there, someone to help you out? Just to be thoughtful about it. And also to try and approach these conversations to the extent it feels reasonable to you, with a sense of curiosity and an openness. Because from my experience, a lot of the times people have said things that kind of crossed my line. That was not their intention. And when it was raised, specifically in the last, I would say 5 or 6 years, people are like, I'm so sorry. And then it's done, and it's a quick move on. So I think I like to think about those things.
Cool. So I guess shifting gears a little bit, we talked about a lot of what it was like for you guys to work as a female in the industry. I kind of want to talk about another perspective of, more of just hey, how your perspective of just not working, and even though it's working as a female, but how has that experience been unique in developing games for this growing female audience?
Well, I have, I guess, what I think is a funny story. In that my first job, we were working on a variety of games, and I was working on Gold Miner World or something like that, and there was 2 female designers and 2 male designers, and we got a work for hire to make a game about raising children. And it was just the most awkward situation of we'll put the women on the project. Because obviously they know how that works. You had 2 women, that's a good start. We were 50-50 on the women and as designers, so it was at least we had that. But it was just this really interesting moment where, in some ways I think we probably did it better because we cared and wanted to at least make the game that we were making about it was basically being a mother raising a child in this balance. And while I still resent being assigned to that game, I think it was more like, I thought it was kind of fun and interesting, and definitely, as I'm not the target audience, but I could sympathize with the target audience probably a lot more than my male colleague who was 22 at the time and just like not into that at all. And then later in mobile games and casual games in general, I think being a woman designing stuff and being like, I always do playtests when I was a producer and giving feedback and things, I definitely think it helped having my perspective just add to the pool. Any diversity adding to the pool of thoughts and ideas I think are going to be valuable. And I have often worked with teams that are largely male, so just getting in something that is different and a new point of view I think has always been additive in all the projects that I've worked on.
Yeah, I want to echo like bringing in like a different perspective, because the games that we made like were not intended for women. Red Dead Redemption 2 wasn't targeted to women. And there were definitely moments where it was just like, because I saw this particular mission or piece of content and I found it kind of questionable and I thought it was a bug, like, I don't know that anybody else would have done the same thing, you know? Or there were times when I would play as a female character and I would find so many random bugs, and it's like, because nobody plays as the female character in multiplayer. Eventually my coworker made it randomized, which was great. I had so many allies at Rockstar, I will say that was amazing. And yeah, and then like just like the different perspective is like, I didn't play as many games as my coworkers, so I would be, what does a noob gamer experience feel like? And that brought in a whole lot of new bugs. So like really diversity in like my personal, just all of the different like verticals that make me me.
So that's actually brings up a, sorry, excuse me, I'm recovering from a cold, so I sound like a woman right now. Excuse me. So I think you guys all touched upon like a slight inherent bias that gets, well, at least Katrina definitely touched upon that. I guess based on that, like how many times have you seen that occur throughout your career, specifically in the gaming industry, and maybe also not outside as well? And how do you think that lends also to kind of the hiring process and just overall into who gets staffed on what team and what games?
I mean, it definitely makes an impact. Like,
how many times a million?
Yeah, I mean, we're human. It's easy to make the quick answer of like, oh, it's a game about women and children, let's put the women on it. Like, it's a logical choice in a lot of respects, but it happens constantly. And I think it's happening less as like the whole industry is evolving and we're making games just to be more generally broad and appealing and not just so specifically male or so specifically female, that it's just kind of getting to a slightly more middle ground. At least on the games that we work on feel more targeted to both men and women, and so that makes it easier to not succumb to those biases with game design choices. But I mean, it happens all the time.
The hiring process is like an interesting question, because I did have a friend where both her and her best friend, who was male, were both up for the same job, both equally qualified, and they basically picked him because he would fit their culture better on their team, and because it was an all-male team. And it's like, that both makes sense and is terrible at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think that changes like the hiring decisions, because I have never been interviewed by a woman, not once, except for Girls Who Code. Like all of the tech jobs have been men.
Whereas all of my interviews, I've always had at least one to interview me. I've had a very high ratio of women in the companies that I've worked at across the board, and like even growing up, I've had all of my female friends play games, so I feel like the gender ratio is much smaller in my trajectory. But yeah, the hiring, at Kongregate, we had a very similar thing happen where it was two qualified people, basically different pros and cons, but equal in their qualifications. And I actually remember being, this was pretty early on when I worked there, but I remember being really impressed that our VP of analytics, who was an analytics person we were hiring, said, you know what, they're the same, and we need more women on this team. Why don't we, we should evaluate the women and go with her if they're equal. And everyone was like, yeah, you're right, good call. We do need more women on this team. And so it was just the moment of don't get caught in these biases and say, no, we should be proactive about this.
Additionally, I think some of the other things we can do, like training, awareness, bringing up the conversations, amazing. The other thing that I try and do and think about a lot in my career is the business opportunity, because we want to make games for everyone in the whole world, and the world is a lot bigger than one gender. And so I think the more we diversify our staffs across the people making games, the people selling the games and distributing the games, the better chance we have to really target big monster world impacting success. And so by connecting what I think is morally and socially correct with a business opportunity, I think that is a huge potential. And I think we can keep reminding people of that all the time.
So that shifts us into kind of, what in an ideal world in the future somewhere, what would you guys like to see kind of the gaming industry move towards? From a hiring perspective, work-life balance, conditions, culture, whatever. What was that ideal future look like for you guys? And then ultimately, how would you achieve it? Big question, I know.
Oh no, I can go. I got this. However you consume your media, your video, your TV, your movies, if you think about now, we have this unprecedented amount of content you can go and access, and you can think about any subset, any idea you could have about robots on roller skates underwater, and you're like, oh, actually there's a movie about that. Awesome. In fact, there's a whole set of them. I want games to be the same way. And whether it's a big game that has all of these different experiences in it or a million little games, I want that same diversity across games, because I think there's that many people in the world, and everybody deserves to have gaming experiences that reflect what they're interested in and that are engaging and that can build empathy for other perspectives.
So for me, it's not really related to the work itself, but more about games and how we interact with them. I think I'm really excited to see when we have more diversity and more women in building games and just how the games themselves change. I think we're already trending towards more games that are more and more social and connect us in interesting ways. And when you have the other 50% represented in making those games, the way you communicate, and you can bring that in and make more interesting games and how we connect everything. And I'm just really excited to see what is the next evolution of how we socialize within game spaces. And I think that having more diversity across the board will make that evolutional jump in games much faster.
Yeah, and I will speak to, I have high hopes because I was going through our project gallery, and the diversity in the games that our girls are making is insane. It's super interesting. Everything from there was a game called Angry Girls, and it was about dealing with catcalling and whatever these huge topics are that you don't expect from a middle schooler. They're tackling them now, and so how will that affect the games industry as we do tackle that, have that diversity of these are the most random topics, and they're covered because there are so many diverse people making those games. That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great picture for everything you guys said. So what do you think are some of the core challenges in the industry that need to be fixed, or at least we need to begin talking about more openly to help achieve those that vision?
I will definitely say for me that big piece is inclusion in the workplace. My experience at Rockstar was that there was a female designer before me, there was me, and one after. And none of us overlapped because we didn't. Yeah, that's how it.
Seat was filled.
Yeah. And it would have been amazing had there been a focus on making the space more inclusive and bringing in the diversity, and then having that space be welcoming, so that we would want to stick around and actually have overlap.
Yeah, I think working on the culture and how we think about culture. For so long, it's just using culture as an excuse to have a homogenous group of people, but I think having diverse culture and what that looks like, it's the same thing about inclusion, is the biggest piece to solving this puzzle, and I think a lot of people are working on it. A lot of companies are taking the steps to get there. There are individuals who are advocating, and all the different groups like IGDA has a bunch of stuff. There's Women in Games. There's a bunch of organizations that are coming together, Girls Who Code, working on the education side. So I think we're working on the right problems, and I think that we're making a lot of progress in all of them. So I don't think there's hidden new ones that I don't think we're working on. It's just going to take some time to get there, and the more we talk about it and have people getting into the industry who care and will speak up at their own companies to say, we should do this, this should happen, why aren't we doing this? And just asking that at your own company will make the other people realize, oh, we should think about this, we should do that.
I also just connect back to what I was saying earlier about the business opportunity. Like, look at how big the world's population is. All of those people could be playing your games, but you have to make games that big groups of people want to play. So there are certain segments of the population that are already very well served by games, and I think there's an interesting opportunity out there for maybe people who aren't playing as many games yet.
So I guess to turn that to kind of a lot of our audience members here, who want to enter games, what advice do you have for them? For one, what role should they be looking for? What type of skills should they look to gain to kind of enter this space? Companies, any of the above.
One thing that the opportunity comment made me think of is recently I heard a woman who worked on Stadia talk about being a woman in tech, and she had a comment that just resonated with me so much that I just want to share it further, and that is realizing that because so many women play games, that it's 55% or more of women play games, or of gamers are women, that there's a huge opportunity to make games for them. And the game industry itself has such little representation that going into the game industry, you should think of your point of view as inherently valuable because you have a unique point of view. That is such a big business opportunity for so many companies. So when you go in and say, I am a woman, this is inherently valuable because you need more diverse points of view, because so many women are gamers, and that is something you can go in and say, this has value, and you should think of yourselves as valuable because of that, and for many other reasons too.
And then I would definitely say, be brave. I think one of the biggest things about studying computer science is really getting used to having bugs all the time, getting used to things not working, and not being afraid of that, and just going for it. And that kind of applies to any kind of role. It's like, don't be put off, don't give up, just believe in yourself and keep going.
I think there's also a part of like, if you want to be in games, you can be in games tonight. Like, go get a game that has a mod toolkit and start modding it and trying to figure it out and make yourself really good. Figure out what you're good at, where you have a unique perspective, where you can do something interesting. Work with people that you know. You don't have to get paid to be making games. If you can find the time and carve it out, that's how you build the skills, and that's how you get in there, because it's a competitive industry. I think a lot of people in here are in games in some capacity. It's very competitive. It is a career that many people dream about, so you have to be very, very good. And there's no end to the amount you can help yourself be better.
Yeah, and to speak to sort of doing the games thing on the outside, I definitely built my bravery muscle by attending a lot of hackathons.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you have a short time, it doesn't have to interfere with the rest of your life, just like 48 hours or 24 hours on each hour, whatever it is, like go in, find a team, make something, even if you fail spectacularly, that's okay, just like as long as you keep attending them, you will become better. Because there were definitely hackathons where we had no product at the end, but it's okay, because I learned a lot of things along the way.
I think we covered a good section of my monitor. Were there any last minute advice or comments you guys wanted to make as a panel? Are you covered?
I'm interested to hear if people have any questions.
Yes. So I was going to open it up. Okay.
We have a couple of questions on Slido.
Oh, perfect. So we had a link. So our first question is for Katrina. one person asked, I'm not too familiar with the producer role. It seems unique to gaming and more media-centric companies. Can you explain what that role looks like?
Yeah, I think producer, so if you get in the game industry, you'll find that everyone has their own definitions for every role. And it's different for genre, it's different for, are you making AAA games, are you making mobile games? So it's hard to say exactly what a producer is, but generally from the production that I've done is largely kind of partial project management of just working with the entire team, making sure everyone's coordinated, making sure everyone's on the same page, and helping organize everything so none of the small bits fall through the cracks and that you're going to hit everything on time. And then the second half is working with designers and product managers and making sure that your game is going to hit the business goals. So it's a kind of two-bit, and then what percentage you're doing that is what I've seen vary the most. I've been in spots where I'm very much just project management and not heavily involved in design or specs or what features we're going to be rolling out. And then there's been bits where that is largely what I'm doing. I'm writing specs, I'm doing design docs, I'm making play tests, and so it's a spectrum of all of those things, and it totally depends on what company you're at. And I've been all in mobile games, so it's also different at AAA games, what that also looks like.
Yeah, at Rockstar it was a little bit different, where it was mostly on the design side of things. But the designers also, like, we kind of were producers of our own content, so it was our job to reach out to whatever teams we needed things from and make sure our features got completed at the time that they were supposed to be completed.
Cool. Our second question is, what are some reasons women are underrepresented based on your experience, and at what point? Okay, sorry, I'm going to rephrase this question a little bit. So I think there's multiple questions in this question. One is kind of how did each one of you kind of get into the industry? At what point do you feel that you would stay in the industry versus leave? As well as based on all your experiences, why are some of the reasons for women being underrepresented? So yeah, a lot of questions in one.
Yeah. I can tackle some of them. Yeah. So my experience, I got into the games industry because I enjoyed a lot of things as a child, and I found computer science to be a perfect marriage of arts and logic. And so in 10th grade, my first project was making a game, and I said, that's what I want to do, done. But on the side of like women being underrepresented, that really has been kind of a marketing thing almost. So way back in the day, computer science was a woman's job because men were the engineers, and at some point personal computers were invented and they were marketed to men. And all of a sudden, men were the ones with access. And so access has really been the reason why women are underrepresented in the industry.
So I played games since I can remember, and always loved playing them. And I remember somewhere in high school or before high school thinking about what you want to do with life and being like, oh, video games would be fun. I've always enjoyed my interests are diverse, and I love the idea of having something that comes together and brings the artists, the engineers, the musicians, and all of it coming together to create a really cool product, a cool piece of art. And so wanted to get into games of that, and so I went to college, studied games, and then got a job out of college from a professor. So that's how I started. What was the second half of that question?
So the second half of that question was, at what point do you feel like you would leave the game industry versus not?
Yes, I wanted to ask because I've thought about leaving the game industry. So I think the piece that hit me the hardest early on in my career was the work-life balance. My first job, I was there till 10 p.m. basically every night, and it would be kind of under the guise of like, let's play video games together and hang out and socialize. We were all college buddies, so it was okay, it was kind of fun. But there was a limit where it started to wear on me of like, okay, this is like 10 to 12 hour days, and sure, some of it's playing video games and hanging out with friends, but a lot of it was just a way to get you to stay a lot longer. And then the next job that I had was a very similar kind of feeling. It was less hanging out with friends, but more of just this expectation that, oh, there's a build going out tomorrow, you're going to be here until midnight, right? Like, you have to be here, this is the only acceptable thing. And so that, I was like thinking, oh, I can't do this anymore, and I kept hearing the same stories and the same stories. But I found Kongregate, which is a publisher, so we don't actually make the games in-house. So that ended up being a place, and also Emily, our CEO, is very, very adamant about work-life balance. And so I found this place, and now I have, that is a much healthier feeling for me, and I'm very happy to be in the game industry now. But there was that was the point where I was kind of worried of just like, I can't do until midnight every night for the rest of my life. So that is, I think games are changing, but that's the double-edged sword, I think, of having so many people being passionate about it, so much competition, is that's I think one of the biggest struggles that I see, a lot of this just for everyone involved in games.
I got started in games because a buddy asked me to interview at a game studio. I did not have a deep passion for games, and I said sure to a friend. And I went into the conversation, and I was there for 5 minutes, and I was like, I'm in. And they were like, we have more questions. And I was like, no, I'm in. I'm doing this. This is awesome. That was a very long time ago. But since then, I've actually left the game industry a couple of times. Getting to like different points in my career where projects had ended or things had moved on or companies had changed, and I was like, I'm ready to do something else. And I keep coming back, I think maybe a flip side of what you're talking about, because the passion of people that work in games is completely motivating for me. It's so exciting, like to be involved with helping clear the path for people with these amazing ideas that's what I want to do every day. And it is a challenge to keep the work-life balance, but that belief, that drive, like that kind of momentum is what I want to have around myself, and so that's what
it is very motivating. I agree.
And then one of our last submitted questions, and I'm going to pause. Does anyone else here have a question that they want answered? Okay. Yep. We'll go with you go first.
I work at a video game company that's been there for a few years, and it's always been a gender ratio, like only been like 10% female, and it's gone up. And I think a question that my manager was also we wonder about, but we don't really know exactly, is how do you improve culture? In my opinion, I do think they do a lot in terms of hiring and wording of the job description to make it feel inclusive. In the game, there's not so much you can do. It's a very oriented video game. So in terms of culture, do you have any suggestions? Like someone who's on some team suggests or something to improve on?
Did everyone hear that question?
Yeah, so essentially, I'm going to shorten it, I'm sorry. She was asking, what are some tips and advice on how can you improve culture in industries or like companies that are very resistant to change? Is that a good summary?
I can actually speak to a couple of the things that are happening at Amazon that are super awesome. And it is a really big company, so they can, have people devoted to work on this kind of stuff. But we've got a lot of programs around training and awareness, but you can bring people in from outside to help on that if your leadership is interested. You can run book clubs. I think there's a lot of work around recruitment and trying to be in contact, building relationships with people for internships, and working through different nonprofits that try and connect women who are interested in games with your org. So those are a few of the things that we have done that I think have seen some really good results.
On a more individual level, I feel like it's been mixed success of, reaching out to managers and other leadership within the company. I've been lucky to become friends with leadership at different companies that I've been at. And talking to them about it and just saying like, hey, this seems weird, we should try and fix this. Because it's like those kinds of programs have to come from top down usually.
True.
And so it's gonna be hard to get the momentum going if you're just kind of one person on a team and getting even to the voices up there. But I think if you can talk with your coworkers and the people around, it's kind of with all of these things in life, if you can get enough voices to say, hey, this is bad, people have to start listening. And like, you know, you'll get the next layer to listen, and then the next layer. It's not going to be fast or easy, or if you know people higher up, you can just talk to them and be like, hi, I think this is a problem. I want to address my concerns and why I think it would be valuable. Like that, it won't necessarily change it, but it will be the stepping stone to help it.
And I think we had one more other question back there. I'm going to do the mic.
Hey, I had a quick question about, I don't come from gaming, but one question I had more generally was, what are some things that other industries can take away from gaming that when you guys look at stuff that you do internally in gaming that other industries should take away from it? I think an example I love is Pokemon Go. It's actually the best health tech app with a ton of engagement, and led to this unintended consequence of people just walking around to play the game a lot. So we just love to get your thoughts on what are things other industries can learn from gaming.
I mean, everyone loves games, so like just thinking about how you can make your own product or app or internal processes or however, like you can apply games to basically any lens. And so if you want to make it more interesting, think about why are people motivated by games, what is fun, and if you can use those tools, I think you can just get better engagement with products or processes, in internal, external, whatever it is. By making things fun, people are more likely to want to do it.
I think maybe a related piece of that is games, and I think every industry does this, but I think games are maybe a little bit ahead on user testing and finding different ways to user test your product or your experience all along the way. And I think it connects to issues of diversity around making sure your users are accurately representing your customer base. I think games have done a good job in that front.
To the point of like the business case that you've been getting at, saying how there really is an opportunity to be making games for more people than have been made for traditionally. Sure.
Do you mind?
Yeah.
I think the kind of a piece to her question before that we didn't really get to was how none of the games that I'm making right now are in any way female oriented, right? So I think like that's probably a big part of the problem for that company. Is like if they're not even trying to make games for those people, there's probably a lot less motivation to have those people in the company working on the back of it. So could be used as rationale for this. But do you have any resources or examples or link people to really like arm them with information about those business cases? Specifically, if people are working at a company where they are having trouble convincing anyone that there might be an audience worth reaching that they're not reaching.
Sure. We can follow up maybe after on some specific resources, but I think like the broader framework to think about is trying to connect what your company is good at and what they're passionate about with customers that might be good for that product. Like every company can't make every product, and I think this really speaks to the fun factor. Like for making games is incredibly difficult, and so you have to make a game that your team wants to make and that they're excited about, and that they're excited to get their customers like worked up about it. So I think there has to be a bit of a conversation there with multiple factors going into that kind of analysis. But we can take it from there. There are some things online around female gamers and gaming behaviors in different populations, but to build a business case on that, you have to take into account all those different factors because it is so hard.
Oh yeah.
This is more towards Kate. If you have things to add, please do. But since you've moved around from gaming to non-gaming, gaming to non-gaming, what are some things that you could recommend to us who are trying to break into the gaming industry? Because I don't have distinct gaming background aside from, I love games, I've been playing them since I couldn't talk, I've been playing them forever. But how can I make it visible on my resume or in interviews that say I have soft skills that would work well in the gaming industry, you should give me a chance?
I think that's a great question. Number one, I think you can totally do a cover letter that speaks to that and be thoughtful and concise about like where you're coming from and why you think your experience is relevant. The other thing you can do is, depending on your area of interest or expertise, like start to develop some actual skills. You can go to hackathons and be a producer for a weekend and figure out what that means. And if you win an award at a hackathon, it's okay if it was 2 days. You can put that on your resume, like that's relevant. If you want to do art, like start finding some free tools to make some art so you can develop a reel. It's okay that it's not in an actual game, but just so people can get some sample of your work product. These things do take time, and I think that's the challenge. And the investment, but that's some of the best ways I've seen people break in. And the other thing is meeting people in the gaming industry, because so many of these jobs come from people you know. And so
Any industry, really.
yeah, that's how I got, literally, I was working at a bank. And someone said, she seems like she can do math and keep things organized, and that's why I'm here. Sure.
It kind of goes, it kind of actually adds on to her. So I am a character artist, and I've been trying to recently get into games. Most of my work is from non-production. It's from research, science, or freelance. And so I'm told constantly by the recruiters that I need the production experience. Like, how can I get that production experience if I never had that opportunity?
That's a tough one. Oh, do you want to take that? I've got one.
Go for it.
Okay.
I was agreeing. Oh, that's, yeah.
Yeah, but it is tricky. And it's a little bit, yeah, it is an add-on, the translation. I think the best thing I would recommend is trying to find some people to work on a mod with. So you could use, because the big thing you want to do is make sure you're up to date on the tool set. And then if you have work in a mod and it's a multi-person mod, again, this is time and investment, but you would have a way to that you can show your work, even if it's not a game that's necessarily for sale. That said, there are contests for mods. If you win awards for any work you've done, put that out there as a headline, like, I am a shining star, I'm ready to do this work. That would be the way you could probably make the closest connection.
Yeah, I was going to say, if there are any open source projects too, just like seek them out and submit.
Actually, my other question is towards you. So, I guess what resources that are free that I can learn for Python too?
Oh, I have so many.
Yeah. And then we have one more question in the back. I think it's you. Yeah.
Okay. So something I've been kind of hearing is that this, like certainly a lot of studios are resistant to changing to be more inclusive, and partly it's because they're not, a lot of reasons, right? They're not hiring women because the kinds of games that they make are not targeted for women or something like that. And it seems like a lot of studios, when you form a studio, it's going to be a bunch of people who are interested in making a certain type of game, and that's why that studio exists. To have, what do you think about the idea of just making more the focus of not changing existing studios to be more gender inclusive, but creating new ones where they are formed for the purpose of creating games for different types of games other than the ones that currently exist. Like, it just seems like it would be very almost. It seems like if you want to cause the studio to change the way it does things away from its original purpose, you're fighting like an uphill battle that maybe isn't the best way to be able to get things done. To get more women in the game industry, just to have more studios making games for women, like that.
Yeah.
It just seems
That would
like
definitely help.
focus should be more on entrepreneurship.
We should all start game companies.
Yeah. I, at the same time, don't want to be shy about saying, like, products can be changed, especially at AAA companies that have a lot of money that could be building, like, products that are more inclusive. Because I think Red Dead Redemption 2, there's one of the gang members is a woman, and she's, like, a whole character. And so, like, there are times when it's like, yeah, this can be part of the game. In multiplayer, you can be a female character. Like, it is, but it also, like, if their internal culture doesn't welcome women, they won't be making the games. But that doesn't mean, like, the game isn't necessarily for women. And there are, I'm sure, tons of women who play. Rockstar Games, you know. So I know because I played through GTA 5 and flew through it.
Yep,
Loved
yep.
it. So I don't want to shy away from saying that they should change.
Yeah, but I definitely agree. Like having, if there are women entrepreneurs who want to make games, go start a business. It is a huge opportunity. It's a huge market that is not being fully tapped. So there is truly an opportunity to say, like, I have an idea for a game that I think will target women, and you can certainly probably find funding, and I know there's lots of ways of figuring that out. It's a whole different challenge, a whole different ballgame, but is one where I think it is very doable at this point to like have more opportunity than just another AAA game where you're shooting all the things. Hey, I mean, they're good. I still play them. I just, we could use some diversity. I guess.
What I was kind of thinking was like making more AAA games for women, or studios that would be at that.
Even just like
compete with them in
looking
that
at
way.
Overwatch, the diversity of characters is quite amazing.
It's awesome.
I mean, there's an Indian woman. I don't think I've seen one in a game before. At least not AAA.
Well, and like back to the business case, I think League of Legends is like pretty close to 50-50, right? And then again, you talk about this big diversity of characters and experience lots of different ways to play. Like, so I think there's definitely a yes and.
Yes.
Also, it just dawned on me that analytics have really helped this a lot.
It's true.
So I think our ability to know who the audience for your games is a very powerful piece of information. So knowing that League has such a huge base of women who play it is really easy to say we should make things for women. So I think, all of the games that we work on, we track all of the data, but sometimes we don't actually do gender breakdowns very well, and we don't look at it very often, and that is something we probably should do and think about and use as a piece of information to help direct where we add features and how we think about things, or if we have characters in the games, what is really to those.
So growing up, playing video games was Save the Princess, and then you got into fighting games with Killer Instinct and very suggestively presented women. You've been in game design. What are the conversations like when you're in the room and they're designing female characters that you may disagree with, but appeal to men to sell a game? What's that like? Because when you say be brave in those situations, I want to know what that conversation is.
Well, at Kong, we didn't have, this wasn't with explicitly the developers as they were making it, but we've had multiple games. Like, we work with 3D publishers all over the world. We're a third-party publisher. We have Kongregate.com and games that are successful on that we then promote in different ways. And I remember there's been a handful of conversations where, we'll ask for promotional art from the developers and say, hey, we want to promote your game, and they send these just like ridiculous images just with scantily clad women, and our whole company is just like, this is actually unacceptable, and we just don't allow it. And the conversation is always like, you're cutting out a huge chunk of your audience by doing this, and also you can still make it appealing and fun and sexy or something without it being grotesque and ridiculous and just completely disgusting. And so we've actually had this conversation multiple times with multiple developers. I remember we had an app icon with just like boobs overflowing on the app icon. And just we all kind of were like, what is going on? And we just sent them an email and we're like, this is not allowed. We will not publish your game if you want this kind of imagery. It is not okay. It will not give you negative installs, like change it to be more appropriate. Like, it's fine. And we've done, I don't know if we've done A/B tests. It'd be interesting to have. But there's no reason to do it.
Are there any other questions from the audience?
I have a question for Kate. You talk about the opportunity, that's a great argument to make, a huge business opportunity. Do you have any advice on how to make that business case? Whether it's specific templates for business cases that have been made in the past that have been effective, or just general advice on how to create that case?
I think every game every game starts with an idea of something that's fun that a creative person wants to make, that is excited to see, or maybe a group of people. So the first thing I usually start with when we work with game teams is a concept. Like, what are you really trying to do? What's the fantasy that someone's going to have? Like, why is this going to be exciting? So we start with that, and then we would look at that and take that to, okay, so who is the customer? Do they exist? Are they currently well served? Does this game actually already exist and you're just trying to do something that's 5% different? Or are you actually taking a unique take on it? So I would start with a concept and then go to connect it to the like product market fit, like what's actually out there. And at that point, that's when you bring in the data analysis. But always start with a game that's going to capture someone's heart and mind. And then you go to who your customers are.
Cool. If there are no other questions, I think we can probably move to more like the networking. There's still more food out there as well. So, kind of the area where you guys were making before, we can just move out there. And then, and then you can have more intimate conversation with our panelists.